So yes, it's an anthropological approach of Buddhist practice in contemporary Korea, and so I will do my speech in English, and after we can have times for discussion. But if something maybe is not clear, also because of my French pronunciation, so please don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask for clarification. When I'm speaking, I prefer, so don't hesitate to tell me. So I try to put some text in the PPT so you can read at the same time some aspects. So in order to start, I put a small abstract of the papers here, and so to make it simpler, I will show you the abstract, and then I will start my real presentation. So this is the abstract of my presentation. So prayers for practical benefits, academic success, health or prosperity are a major part of Buddhism as it's lived in Asia, but their status is controversial, both locally and academically. Widely practiced, they are also generally criticized in Buddhist intellectual circles. Moreover, the people who practice them, mostly women, also refuse to, I'm quoting, pray like their grandmothers. And they express the will to practice an enlightened Buddhism. Based on the case of prayers for academic success in South Korea, this lecture presents how the so-called prayers for good fortune, or kibok, are framed within contemporary Buddhism. It also describes how clerics and lay people share the concern to develop an educated Buddhism where it is possible to pray for this worldly happiness in a correct, here properly Buddhist way. Through the description of a case study, this paper provides a reflection on the notion of popular religion in the context of contemporary Buddhism. So I can just check the time, maybe. I'm just taking that to check. So prayers for academic achievement with images of crowds going into churches and temples, or mother with hands clasped in prayers appear in newspaper, even in France, as a kind of folkloric image of religious life in South Korea. However, despite their importance in the life of many families and individuals, and also in many religious sites, these prayers are often relegated to folklore and popular religious practices. They tend to be excluded from academic studies on Buddhism, or are quite marginal within them. They are also commonly used to illustrate what is described as the influence of shamanism or popular beliefs on Buddhism, or as a consequence of excessive greed. Here, by shifting perspective and using an ethnographic methodology, this presentation aims at setting out at taking this practice and ceremonies dedicated to academic success quite seriously. Far from being marginal, these ceremonies are organized in most Buddhist temples around the country and can provide a valuable entry point to understand what live Buddhism, I will go back to this term after, what live Buddhism means in South Korea today for many of the lay people who visit the temple, but also for the Buddhist monastics and lay people who organize and run these events. So here I am using the notion of live religion. So I put some references on this notion. So the notion of live religion was mostly used first to describe religious life in the US. But it was also developed for Buddhism. So this was a project by McGuire, by Bronx and Brooke Shetnek to make a handbook of live Buddhism. And but there are also other projects to develop this approach about live religion. So here I'm using the notion of live religion rather than popular religion, because as I hope to show, the kind of practice I'm focusing on brings together monastic and lay concerns. It's not just an issue for lay people. In addition, the kind of propitiatory practices have a folk religious dimension, for example, with concern about family protection and search for good fortune, but they can also have a more literate and even doctrinal dimension. So we can go back to this point in the discussion, maybe, but one point of this presentation is to argue that popular religion, the notion of popular religion, is not well fitted to describe prayers for academic success, and that light religion is a better, may work more accurately as a notion. So when it comes to the anthropological approach of religion in practice in Korea, there is a lot of interesting work on the practice of mudang. So most anthropologists who study religion in Korea are focused on shamanism. But by contrast, the other religions or ritual practices, so different schools of Buddhism or Christianity or rituals stemming from Confucianism, have been less studied in terms of their everyday lived realities. Generally, they have been deeply studied from a historical or philosophical or textual perspective. Nonetheless, there are a few studies on actual practices and life Buddhism in Korea, but it's still a minority. So in order to complement historical and philosophical approach, this presentation focuses on the practice of life Buddhism, and more especially on the main group visiting Buddhist temples. Here it's women who often describe themselves as jubu, as housewives. For this, it sets out to describe one of the emblematic practices associated with these women, so the prayers for the children's academic success, more known as Ipshikido. And especially the prayers for college scholastic ability test, the Sunan. So normally, if I'm presenting this research in France, I have to explain, the Sunan is important in Korea, but here I don't need, obviously. But I'm just saying that the result of this exam, as you all well know, has a lasting and decisive impact on the social identity of the young adult, and by extension on their family. Prayers by mothers, grandmothers, and other relatives for success in this exam are indicative of the Sunung importance in family and also in broader society, but also of the concerns, hopes, and sacrifices that go with the preparation of this exam. In this respect, these prayers are part of an older responsibility that has traditionally fallen to adult women, praying for the family's well-being, health, safety, and success. So, what do these prayers tell us about life Buddhism? It is important to begin by noting that in Korea, women's responsibility for propitiatory rituals, for good effects, is not specific to Buddhism, obviously. And yet, also prayers for children's academic success are not specific to Buddhism. A closer analysis of these practices allows us to shed light on this tradition. Indeed, these prayers have become an important topic in Buddhist temples, where they have found a place in deeply rooted tradition of propitiatory or protective rituals. Prayers for success in exam can be seen as an entry point to empirically explore practice directed at a practical benefit in Buddhism. So the research upon which this presentation draws was based on an ethnographic methodology, ethnographic study, and our methodology is called participant observation, conducted in temples around South Korea over several periods since 2006. During this research, I participated regularly in the activities of different temples, especially Bongwon-sa in Seoul, in Gangnam, Seoul, and especially in the activities of the Lay Follower Association. So I took part in the activities for about a year. I also took part in retreats and visited other temples, but I mostly focused on Bongwon-sa for this research. In addition to informal discussion, I conducted in-depth interviews with men and women, both lay people and monastics. My research focus has later evolved, but my interest for academic prayers for academic success remained, and when I'm back in Korea, I try to attend these prayers. But my research is mostly based on the fieldwork I did about 10-15 years ago, but sometime I came back, for example, 2 years ago, I did other observation. When I'm presenting speeches, public speeches, then I will present the names of the author directly, because it's public speeches. But for private conversation, when I'm referring to private conversation, I have anonymized the names, put them, and also change some details so we cannot identify the people who were interviewed. Here, and you will see that in this work, I use a lot of description as a way to present practices and also to convey my analysis. So the style is quite a narrative, as you will see. So first, I will then narrate how I first met with these prayers and their ambivalent status. So I first attended, I will maybe put pictures of the prayers to have a look how it is. So I first attended the prayers for academic success in 2007, and then I had begun my fieldwork several months earlier, but I was still hesitant about which entry point would provide a fruitful approach to study Buddhism as it is practice. So I was looking to a place where I could see what is practice in Buddhism. At that time, I was involved in Buddhist intellectual circles that were bringing together monastic and lay people in the study of text and Buddhist philosophy. In this environment of Buddhist intellectuals, Ipshikido, prayers for academic success, were not looked at in a positive way. They were frankly criticized generally, and the Buddhism that was valorized was that of monastic communities or study of text. It was also an atmosphere was so-called Kibok controversy, Kibok Nonjeng. So this expression of Kibok Bulgyo Nonjeng, I'm taking it from Yusongmu Kyosunim, who wrote a paper with this title in Bulgyo Pyongnon. But he referred to a special issue of this journal that was published in 2001. That was called Let's Talk About Kibok, Kibok Bulgyo Malhanda. And here maybe you cannot read, but the different papers that was published in this issue were criticizing so-called Kibok Bulgyo. So papers were like, is Kibok Buddhism truly Buddhism? Why did Kibok Buddhism emerge? Facts and issues of Kibok Buddhism, and surpassing Nomolokanda, the ideology of Kibok to move toward merit-based Buddhism. So I was in this kind of atmosphere where Kibok Bulgyo was a target of criticism. With the arrival of autumn, this atmosphere intensified. When I was attending Dharma talks and in temples or meditation centers, there were regular warnings that prayers for good fortune, Kibok, were not consistent with Buddhism. And the prayers for university entrance exam were generally taken as an illustration of a harmful trend in contemporary Buddhism, focusing on the satisfaction of individual desires. So when I went to Bongonsa for the first time in November 2007, I was interested to see the signs that were presenting the criticized prayer for exam, Ipshikido. So since I had heard a lot about them, I wanted to attend, not imagining the extent of the ceremony I would witness. When I arrived on the temple on the day of the Sunung, on the exact day of the exam, I was immediately struck by the effervescence of the atmosphere and the bustling of busy people. There were about 1,500 lay people meeting in the temple that day. During this visit, on this particular day of prayer, I came across a woman I already knew. She was a university professor and a member of a group of Buddhist intellectuals. This affiliation and her social status were in contrast with the idea of popular religion generally associated with prayers for academic success. So I was afraid that she might feel embarrassed that I would meet her at the Ipshikido. Actually, she was not embarrassed at all, and she greeted me cheerfully, surprised but happy that I had come to attend the prayer. And she presented the prayer. No, I didn't put it there, I'm sorry. So she was saying, yeah, it's a truly exceptional day, and it only happens once a year. Today, parents, but especially mothers, pray for the children's exam all day long. So the parents pray exactly at the same time as the students are taking the exam. She had herself come for that exact reason. When I explained to her why I had come and talked about the research, she was enthusiastic about introducing me people. And so she brought me to the volunteers working in the temple. after she left and she went back to her prayers. So that's how I met one of my main informants, who was a leader of the Lay Follower Association in Bongwensa. And first, with this first encounter, I was struck and a bit wondering about the paradox between the criticism against Ipshikido and the dynamic and enthusiasm that I could see in the temple, where people are very enthusiastic about this practice and happy to share it. So then I met a woman I will call Mrs. Shim. It's not a real name. She was the leader of one team of the Lay Follower Association of Bongwensa. And she welcomed me with kindness and described with enthusiasm and pride the bustling activity that are praying in the temple that day. She was very happy to present the Ipshikido. She willingly accepted to give me a few minutes for an interview. And then she continued the discussion with joy, talking about the prayers for exam. So I could record, she agreed for me to record the small interview. So here I'm putting a small extract, so you can see how she was presenting the exam. So this is a picture I took just 2 years ago when I came here. And it's just to show that the people are praying exactly at the same time as students are taking exams. So for example, you have Kuko, and then they pray, and Zuhar, etc. So they pray exactly at the same time as the students is taking the exam, and it's important. So the woman, she was explaining that. So here I put the Korean, but sometimes I had no room for it. So sometimes there is a Korean, sometimes not. Sometimes just my translation. So she was explaining. So it's spoken language. It's not a written language, of course. So I'm reading her speech. She said, "Today is really a very special day. It's only once a year. This is what we call the Sunong, the college scholastic ability test. This is a test to get into university all around the country on the same day, the same subject. The people who are here are parents whose children are finishing high school or sitting the exam for a second time. They have come to pray for the exams their children are sitting to go to the university. What is a prayer? You see, that my child is able to concentrate, that they do okay. Myself, with my own child, who I know so well, by focusing on wisdom, I pray with all my heart for them to succeed in the exam. For good consequences to follow, you concentrate your heart. That's what parents do, prayers. So now if you look here, the mothers, the Bosalim, because it's generally the mothers who come, when the mother comes, they say, no, I pray that now my child should be the best that can be, that they may succeed in the exam and have high grades, because they have to have high grades to get into a good university. This is why we pray now. So on a day like today, exactly at the same time as the child's exam, during the whole time of the exam, the monk constantly repeats the name of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, Gwanseum Bosal, Gwanseum Bosal. And listening to Gwanseum Bosal, I make my wish. I think about it, I think about Gwanseum Bosal. And myself, along with my child, who is sitting the exam, I concentrate my heart on a single place. And during the break, we rest at the same time as the child. So Mrs. Shim was part of the team overseeing the event. So she was not praying that year. She was in the organizing team. But her closeness to the mother who were praying was clear. When she talked about their engagement, she was fully including herself among the mother. Indeed, as she told me a few months later, because we kept meeting each other, she had been one of these mothers not that long ago. Back in 1999, she had been among the mothers thronging into the prayer halls because her first son, born in 1981, had sat the university entrance exam. This was when she began to regularly attend Bongwensa. Before then, she had visited a Buddhist temple occasionally, but was not a regular devotee. Mrs. Shim was especially sympathetic with the praying mother because she knew that in just a few years, she would again share their concerns and hopes when her daughter, born in the 90s, would in turn reach the end of the high school. Seeing my interest in Buddhist practices and the subject of my research, she suggested a solution that she presented as self-evident. Why not enroll in the beginner's course, so the Kicho Haktan of the temple? That's what people do when they are interested, she explained. That's what she had herself done when she came to pray for the exam, and that was the right way to do things, she said, if one wanted to learn and participate in the temple activities. So that's how I inscribed in the Kicho Haktan, finally. So now I will focus on this educational part that is linked with prayers. As I was to learn later, Mrs. Shim advice to enroll in Buddhist classes for beginners reflected her own commitment to Buddhism. When she had come to the temple for the first time, looking for a place to pray for her son, she had been touched by the prayers and had eventually decided to study and become more involved in the practice of Buddhism. So first she had come to pray for her child, but she had stayed in the temple and kept attending it and enrolled in classes. So this is an interview with her I did later, where she was explaining her union with Buddhism. So she explained, in 1999, as her oldest child was in the last year of high school, I performed 100 days of prayer. As you know, you have to enroll for the prayer, etc. As it happened, our son did not get into university and sat the exam again in 2000. Maybe and I make it a bit shorter. As it happened, yeah. So during the 100 days of prayer at Bongensa, I came to pray at dawn for 100 days. At the 4 p.m. At the 4 a.m. prayers. I did that and our son got into university. I was so grateful because after all, it was a university in Seoul. I had performed my prostrations every day at Bongensa. So she was waking up extremely early and was doing prostration every day at the temple. At the time, it was the monk Taejong who led the prayers, and I liked them very much. There were also invocations, prayer, Yeonbul, accompanied by the Moktak and the Chungwon Moon prayers. During the prayers for university exam, so she was explaining the different prayers, and I really enjoyed them so much. And so for myself, when I was praying for my child, my heart became more mature. How can I put it? Even if it was difficult, thanks to my child, I studied and practiced. Yes, thanks to my child, I studied and practiced, she repeated. So this is not for all the women the same thing, obviously, but many of the women I met who were involved in the temple's activities, they had started their engagement with prayers for their children. And at their occasion, they had got to know about the teaching and got interested in other aspects of Buddhism as well. Anyone wishing to pray is encouraged to first learn to do so. So at Bongensa, for example, but it works also in other temples, for anyone interested in Buddhism, the answer is unanimous. They must enroll in the beginner's course in Kicho Haktang. So it can have different names depending on temple. In this respect, the advice Mrs. Shim gave me reflected the teaching she had received from the monks during the prayers for the exam. These prayers are only acceptable if one wishes to learn authentic Buddhism. During the various ceremonies and activities organized for the university entrance exam, the participants were encouraged to avoid any practice that might be seen as superstitious, mishinjok, or in pursuit of good fortune, kibok jogging. And as a result, they were encouraged to study the principle and practice of Buddhism. As part of this objective, broad program of classes were offered, and among them a class specifically for beginners. So the Kicho Haktang was a beginner's class, which was open to everyone and which provided a general introduction to those interested in the monastery's activities. The program offered a weekly class for 3 months, and it was organized 3 times a year. The classes took place in the week, in the morning or later in the evening. The morning classes were generally frequented by housewives, jubu, concerned with university entrance. So I've seen in the class about 70% of the women who were attending the Buddhist introduction class were preparing prayers for their children, for the students. The evening classes were attended by people praying for the exams, but also by younger people who worked during the day, so it was a bit different. The classes were almost all given by monks and closely followed the Introduction to Buddhism, Bulgyo in Moon manual, published by the Shogi Order in 2007. Several sessions were dedicated to the foundations of Buddhist doctrine, to faith and practice in the everyday lives of Buddhism, and to self-cultivation. This class allowed the monks to present beginners with the foundations of the history, culture, and doctrine of Buddhism, but there were also the opportunity for close contact between the monastery and people who did not generally attend regularly the temple. This program, above all, aimed to create lay members who were educated and involved in the daily life and rituals of the monastery. It was seen as a starting point, as a first step in a longer educational process. After 3 months of class, the integration of the new arrivals in the lay association was near automatic. So almost all students of the beginners class were enrolled after that in the association. The program concluded with a ceremony where certificates were awarded to participants, who each also received a Buddhist name. At the ceremony, they committed to following the 5 rules of lay Buddhism, not killing, etc. And before and during the ceremony, they were also encouraged to take part in the lay association in its various activities. So a large number of the participants of the classes then became followers of the association. Those who attended the 3 month classes could after attend more intensive teaching the next year. The majority of those who enrolled in the course were present regularly and participated in the final ceremony. It was rare that somebody opposed their final enrollment in the lay association. However, it was not uncommon that people were not very active in it, so they didn't refuse to go in the association, but not all of them continue intensively to participate in the meeting. But yeah, some of them did. So here I kind of understood the kind of paradox it seems to appear to me, but not as a paradox then, but more something different, that prayers with practical aims, like prayers for academic success or for other benefits, were quite accepted in temple, as long as they were reformulated and reframed in a Buddhist logic. So an important issue in the teachings that the lay people were receiving was making a difference between a kind of shamanic efficacy and a Buddhist efficacy of ritual. With the religious reorganization in the 20th century, there has been a criticism of the religious continuum between Buddhism and folk religion among the common lay people. In this context, prayers for practical purposes became particularly problematic. However, efficacious prayers were not at all together rejected. They were instead framed and reformulated. So I'm just saying, so this is just a small extract from a teaching in Jigshi-san, just to present what kind of prayers was firmly rejected. But the interesting thing is the Ponmun was given to an audience of mostly laywomen who were praying for the university entrance examination. And the monk was criticizing them, the prayers, not the people, saying, nowadays one can see a lot of people who are praying for the success to the university entrance examination. And then he was scolding the attendants. You are not beggars who beg the Buddha or the Bodhisattvas for getting something. Ah, Buddha, give me this, give me that, while rubbing one hand. This is not Buddhism, you should not do that. So he was very firm in explaining what people should not do. And actually, the women who were attending the talk were very enthusiastic about this teaching. And it was not an interdiction of prayers for the university entrance exam, but more criticism of a certain form of prayers. So participants were widely encouraged to change the prayer, not to negotiate with bodhisattvas or Buddhas as they would do with spirits in a kind of in a shamanic cult, but more to understand the logic of Buddhist logic of karma or cause and consequences and merit more than negotiating for success. So now I will go back to my description to see how these prayers are reformulated. So after meeting the laywoman from the association, I came back to the prayers room. It was now almost 5 p.m. The day was coming to an end. And so the monk who was in charge of the temple at the time was now famous Myongjin Sonim, who was giving talk. So I will present what he was teaching. So the monk in charge of the monastery was going to give a teaching as part of the merit sharing, the Huerian ceremony. Present in most Buddhist rituals, as you know, this stage consists of sharing the merits accumulated through prayers, offerings, and devotions with all beings. This is the culminating point of the ceremonies. The prayers are drawing to a close, but the temple halls remains full and the participants attentive. After intense applause for the monk who has just led the prayers and the final recitation of the Heart Sutra, the Chujisonim, the head monk, addresses the audience warmly and empathetically, but with a noticeably free tone. He speaks about the difficulties and concerns of being a parent, the challenge posed by the university entrance exam, but reinterprets the purpose of prayer from a Buddhist and ethical perspective. He encouraged the parents to pray for the children to become accomplished human beings. So what touched me there was the lot of empathy and warm attitude that the head monk was giving to the parents present. So even if he could criticize these prayers in other contexts, even the head monk of this temple was criticizing these prayers, when he was in front of the parents, he was very giving them a lot of understanding to their practice, and also on their situation as parents. In the years following the first encounter with prayer for the university entrance exam, I had the opportunity to attend many similar ceremonies and prayers. As I focused my fieldwork on this particular temple, I was able to hear Myungjin Sonim give teaching in this context on many occasions. So I noticed that the main themes were repeated from one teaching to the next. Also, this monk's stance on this prayer is complex, even ambivalent. He consistently demonstrated great ease when addressing parents of high school students. He managed to embrace the concern of the parents and skillfully integrate them into core issues of Buddhism. This was the case, for example, during the merit-sharing prayer on November 9, 2009, so 2 years after, following a 100 day of prayer for the 2010 university entrance exam. As usual, he revisited the difficulties and responsibilities inherent in the role of a parent. Right after concerns for their children's health came the support for the university entrance examination. So, the monk himself began his teaching by placing this key moment among the 2 or 3 major stages of life existence, a term that resonated with what anthropologists refer to as rites of passage. So here I'm giving an extract, this is also the same one. This is an extract of this teaching he gave during the sharing merit ceremony. So I put it to show how the monk was expressing empathy for the parent situation, but also kind of reframing the prayer to frame it in a more orthodox way and also in a more moral way. We will see also maybe a bit later. This is what it means to be a parent and to raise a child. When they go to middle school, you worry that they might fall behind others. And if they get sick and stay bedridden, their parents can't sleep. And so on, they end up in high school, and then it's time for the university entrance exam. So step by step, we come to this great stage. We are the moment when, among the 2 or 3 great stages of life, our little ones are about to go through the biggest first step. Parents-children relationship. These are karmic relationships, opium. Good and bad karma passed down from great past life. That's why you are here today, gather again to pray. It's karmic relationship with good causes, Sonyon, and bad causes, Avion, lasting from this great past life. It's through this relationship, it's through them again that you find yourself here today praying. In praying, of course, you have prayed for your child, your son, to get into a good university, for life to go smoothly, for all your wishes to be fulfilled in life. I think you pray in the hope of being answered. I too, before the Buddha, hope that the power of prayer, so Wolyok, Kido Wolyok, it's difficult for me to translate, so if someone has another suggestion, the power of prayer, Kido Wolyok, will harmoniously fulfill everything. He thanks the temple monk's dedication during the 100 days of past prayer. That is why the power of prayer should fulfill all your prayers. And to go further, it's not just about university, it's about the life we live. As we live, we may encounter difficult things, pleasant things, sometimes hard, sometimes fun, happy, sad, with ups and downs, and that's life, isn't it? As we look at the world, how should we live our life? What does it mean to live a good life? What really is happiness? We should really think about these things again. That's what being Buddhist means. A Buddhist wonders what happiness is, what we call happiness. when material wealth and economic success are achieved, are we really satisfied and happy? In my opinion, certainly not. Where do we find the value of happiness? We need to be concerned with that. Will our sons and daughters be happy? They must become good people, socially and humanly, the kind of people who are loved and respected by those around them. Wealth full of money, great honor, what is all of that? That's right. So we can see that he was first expressing a lot of empathy for the parents, and I made it a bit shorter, but then also kind of framing the situation into Buddhist vocabulary and perspective, and also putting into question also the moral aspects of academic competition, and also this I made a bit shorter, but to interrogate the goal also of mundane success. After emphasizing the parents' responsibility, he gave special importance to the greatness of the maternal role. He even recited a poem dedicated to his mother by the monk Shinmok. So finally, he reframed parenthood within the Buddhist logic of karma, which underpins the presence of parents on this day. So also after reaffirming and validating the power of prayer to fulfill wishes, including that of entering a good university, he doesn't deny that prayers may help children to enter a good university, just put it in a different perspective. He shifted his discourse toward a moral teaching with resonances beyond Buddhism, focusing on the question of true happiness. Beyond the examples he drew from, so this I didn't put here, but he put examples of very powerful people in the country who had a very unfortunate life or death, and also about he spoke about suicide. And this thematic obviously could not leave parents indifferent, especially in a context where the high national suicide rate has become a public issue. So this made the parents think about this kind of issue, competition, and etc. As this reflection on the good life and happiness deepened, the monk narrowed his focus to issue more specific on Buddhism. Continuing in the same vein, I didn't put all the talk, with example, he offered the audience an accessible discussion on the canonical questions of impermanence, greed, and its extension. So after this straightforward discussion of Buddhist concepts, the monk returned to an ethical register, drawing from both Buddhism and Confucian references, to encourage parents to rethink what they wished for their children and to engage them in an ethical reflection on human nature or humanity. Even though the desire for exam success was expressed several times and will be again, he offered a rephrasing that considered the possibility of failure in the exam, going so far as to stress towards the conclusion that academic success might not have the desired effects. So he emphasized that even with academic success, this might not be the way to happiness for the children. Expanding on this point, he illustrated it with a classic four-character Chinese expression that evokes humanity's inability to determine in advance the positive or negative consequences of events. So just to make it more practical, I put another small abstract. It was just the end of the teaching. I am not saying that for your children to expand their humanity, they must fail at everything. If both things happen, success in the exam and the expansion of humanity is great. You should pray for your son or daughter. That while achieving their desire, they also develop good humanity and gain the esteem of others. What I mean is that this is not a prayer for absolutely entering a prestigious university, achieving social success and being accomplished. It is a prayer that our sons and daughters, wherever they go, will be truly virtuous and earn the respect of others. By putting aside just a little the results of the exam, I believe that our sons and daughters should gain this power. It's like the classic story of the old man and his horse by the border. Even the good things that happened may eventually become bad, and bad things become good. So we can see that from this context of Ipshikido, he was giving quite a classical teaching, and the people were very receptive to the argument he was giving. When I exchanged after with the person and after when I attended the association, many people, as the first laywoman I presented at the beginning of the speech said, many were touched by his teaching and then continued to attend the temple. The power of prayer, so Wolyok, is an omnipresent expression when speaking of the fulfillment of wishes in Buddhist temple, and it was indeed present at the end of the teaching, but this time related to the fulfillment of a more moralized wish with distinctly Confucian undertones, developing one's humanity. The monk concluded the merit-sharing ceremony by wishing that at the end of these 100 days of prayers, Buddha's blessing would harmoniously fulfill everyone's wishes. So let us return 2 years earlier, in November 2007. So the monk had just concluded the merit-sharing ceremony. At the end of this teaching, he loudly exclaimed, "Son, daughters," no, I put the talk here. It was the kind of slogan. 사랑 하나들 달더라. So at the end of the teaching, he said that with a very strong voice, so son, daughters, no worry, be strong, we love you. And the people present enthusiastically joined him as he repeated these words of encouragement and second and then a third time. So it was the end of the merit sharing ceremony. The participants greeted each other and after went to the exit. That late afternoon, the atmosphere had relaxed, and the women were speaking freely, exchanging information and encouraging one another. Thanks to all of this, I feel more at peace, one of them said to a friend as she left the prayer hall. In the courtyard, monks and temple volunteers were distributing bags of rice cakes. The mothers warmly thanked them and slipped the bags into their purses. The cakes will be shared with the families that evening. For now, they could not stay long because they had to rush to the exit. It was time to meet their sons or daughters who were leaving the exam centers at the same moment the mothers were leaving the temple. This picture I also put to show the support that is given to the parents who pray for the Ipshikido, for the university entrance examination. And so as long as the prayers are reformulated, they are well accepted. So I have quite a long conclusion that I will present now. So I put it on the slide, so it's maybe easier to follow because of my pronunciation. But I will read it. So, praying for the happiness of the family and its member is one of the major activities in women's religious life, and in Korea today, it is particularly embodied by its highly charged ordeal, that is a competitive university entrance exam. Echoing the impassionate debates and controversies that have surrounded this competitive system in broader societies, the parents, and particularly mothers, prayer reflects the complexity of their concern. They have a desire for social success, but the mother have also a lot of tension and apprehension for the children's well-being. So even the mother concerned about the exam are quite complex. They want the child to succeed, but they are also quite afraid of too much pressure on the child's well-being. And they are worried also for their mental health, a subject that is particularly silent but still somewhat taboo in South Korea today. In praying for this success in the exams, the parents are praying for the child and the family's success, but they are also looking for broader protection from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. By participating in prayers, they also find empathy and support among certain members of the monastic community and other lay people, particularly the women involved in temple life, who often act as the mediators, for example, when it is necessary to enroll for prayers or buy offerings. Here, mediators, I was thinking particularly, for example, of the women who sell candles or who register for prayers, etc. It's not monastic persons, obviously, but they act as intermediary because they give some instructions, they explain how to pray in a more informal way directly to the people who come to the temple. Due to the extent of the emotions, worries, and concerns that they convey, prayer for academic success reflects classical issues in Buddhism. The monastic who provide the teaching and the volunteers in the temple who offer more informal advice are clearly conscious of this and validate the legitimacy of this recourse to Buddhism. In return, when the monk or nun speaks of interdependence between family members and more broadly, or when they question the nature of suffering or happiness, this subject touches those who have come to pray. Clearly and explicitly, monastics and the laypersons working in the temple incorporate this prayer into the classical category of salvific expedients, upaya, the means through which one can achieve dharma. This perspective is also reflected in the organization of the temple that promotes the connection between the prayers and the Buddhist education program, the Kichorakton program I presented before. Many of the participants themselves were receptive to the incorporation of these prayers for exam into broader ethical or spiritual issues as part of a progressive commitment to Buddhism. This maybe I didn't emphasize enough, is that it's not just a top-down process where monastics are encouraging the lay people to pray in such way or such way. Most of the, at least in Bongonsa, most of the lay people who were attending the prayers, these women had received higher education and they wanted to pursue a kind of enlightened Buddhism. They wanted a sophisticated, well-educated form of Buddhism, but they were also concerned for their children. So they wanted to bring together they want to have a well-educated understanding of Buddhism and also to protect their children in a difficult moment. So they were also very receptive of this reframing or proposition of classes, etc. That's what the first woman was saying when she said, "Thanks to my child, I studied, etc." Prayers for exams may appear to be a symbol of popular religious practice, but this notion has its limitation and may even be misleading, as we can see if we look closely at what happens during the ceremonies. The forms of devotion that are encouraged in these rituals are integrated by monastics into broader logics of Buddhism. For practitioners who take part in collective prayers and teaching in temple, there are questions about typical issues of Buddhism, such as uncertainty, interdependence, ethical behavior, concentration, trust in the forces of Buddhism, or physical and mental engagement. Speaking of physical engagement, for example, I'm referring to, for example, the 3,000 full prostration, an activity suggested in the days leading up to the exam. So doing 3,000 full prostration is actually a very intensive physical engagement, and I think it's representative also of the strong engagement of the lay people who attend this prayer. Not everybody is doing it, obviously, but it happens. This integration is fueled by the reform movement in contemporary Buddhism, which have established the education of laity as a priority. More generally, examining these prayers encourages us to question how practices that seek worldly success and happiness are considered in Buddhist circles, and to consider them in a broader category of efficacious practice aiming to achieve a particular effect on this work. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Yeah, so is there any question?
Yeah, I'm very curious of question.
Well, maybe just a very small question for just a starter.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Is there this kind of tradition? I mean, 입시기도 tradition in France? Because in Korea.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, continue. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I mean, in Korea is the kind of biggest deal. I mean, it's not just a big deal; it's really just the biggest one for especially the parents. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, is there this kind of tradition in France?
Yes, there is propitiatory prayers a lot in Catholic churches, for example, but also in mosques or in synagogues. But in France, the baccalaureate, the exam we take at the end of high school, is not as important as Sunung is. It's not a very big deal like Sunung is. So it's less stress on the families so it's not a major event at all, and there are no major prayers like the Ipshikido. But some churches are specialized in prayers for academic success, and when we look, there are a lot of ex voto. We call it ex voto. It's boards that are put on the church's wall to say thank you for blessings. And when we read what is written, a lot of them say thank you for health, but also thank you for academic success, thank you for baccalaureate, the French Sunung, And it comes from late 19th century, but I could not see older works. But you see a lot of ex-voto, but most of the time it's thank you for health or recovery or safe birth of a child or things like that. But you have also thanks for academic success, and so yeah, it happens in religious places in France as well, but in a less massive way as in Korea. But also because baccalaureate is not such a big deal as Sunan is. Yeah.
Different from each other.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions?
So my personal education is related to
Yeah.
and I think thought about Buddhist practice
Yeah.
for a while, and it's quite degrading the contemporary Buddhist.
Sorry, can you speak a bit louder?
Louder, please.
Sorry. I'm really sorry. Yeah. I can come closer.
여기 하나밖에 없습니다. 저 하나인데 이거
유선이라 저희가
유선이라서. 좀 앞으로 나와서 해주시면 어떨까요? 예. 여기 교수님들이 되니까. 유선. 이게 안 됩니다. 예, 앞에 나오세요.
So basically, like I've been thought about the Korean Buddhist praying practices for a while, and it's quite interesting that we have been so obsessed with Kibo.
Yeah.
But it's not the actual tradition that the Buddhist philosophers or Buddhist practices have been meant to be. Since for a long time ago, it's not their actual purpose of doing Buddha praying. So I've been thought that the contemporary Buddhism is quite degrading and devaluing the essence of the Buddhist ideology. And also I've been anthropologically criticizing the way the praying practices have been distorted in a significant way, because in the earliest, the Buddhist practice was meant to doing for the self-liberation. You know, it's called moksha. It's like a release from desire, agony, anxiety, and all over the feelings from freedom of feeling was the actual purpose of the Buddhist practice. But these days, we are actually kind of practicing like commercialized way of praying, which is not the right way of practicing. And also, the biggest essence of practicing is for practicing for themselves. But these days, like many parents are actually, paying a certain amount of money, such as like a teething, to attribute their family's well-being to the monks, by paying a certain amount of money or other kinds of materials. So it's more a materialized practice of Buddhism, which I'm criticizing as a scholar. So is there any way that you can that we can, as a scholar, criticize this distorted contemporary practice of Buddhism, and how can we progress toward a much more authentic Buddhist practice for the future?
Yes, thank you very much for your comment and question. What you expressed was quite well reflected in the Kibok Nonjang, and this issue of Budo Pyongyang was kind of developing this idea of his Kibok distorted vision of Buddhism and so on. But for my research, I'm not a researcher on Buddhism. I'm an anthropologist, and my focus is quite different. So I don't try to. My goal is not to define what is Buddhism or how it could improve. It's more to understand what kind of rituals people are practicing. So I think it's different. Quite different perspectives, because I tried I tried not to criticize, actually. I try to understand the different point of view and how they work together. So my research question was to understand the status of these prayers, because I could hear a lot of criticism, but in temples I could see that people were proud of them and doing them with enthusiasm. So I didn't want it to criticize things. I just wanted to understand how it works together, and so that was my perspective. So it's more understanding people's ritual life than finding a better orientation for Buddhism. Thank you.
My understanding with the test is that obviously not everybody will succeed.
Yeah.
Many won't. I wonder if there's any, what if there's any response by the practitioners when their children don't succeed? Like, do they just accept it, or do they think they should pray harder, or was there a response about failure?
So I don't have a general view of that. For example, the first person I presented, her son failed at the exam for the first time. And it didn't keep her from doing prayers, and so she was even more involved the second year. And so that's when she was doing the very early prayers almost every morning at 4:30, so it's extremely early. And so no, it doesn't put into, and actually in the reframing of the practice, monks, nuns, and also the laity are very cautious not to put them as magical. So they don't say that if the child is doing nothing, the prayers will put him or her to the Seoul National or Bunguk, or I don't know. So it's not like that. So it's more support, so the child can do his best, etc. And so it has a lot to do to. For these months, they cannot stay without doing anything while the child is having the exam. And the temples are also preparing the mothers to support their children, whatever result they receive. So it's first they come to get success, but after a while, when they receive the teaching and talk with other people, etc., it becomes something else, and it's a more global attitude of how to deal with uncertainty and one's desire, etc. And teachings are very emphasizing these points. One's desire is not always fulfilled. That it's classical Buddhist issues. So at first they may come with, I pray, it works. But quickly it changed into something else, especially since the mothers, actually the mothers I could meet at Bongonsa at least, they had a high level of education, and so they were looking for a more sophisticated understanding also. And also among the mothers, many were critical of the exam, but they felt they had to prepare their child as best as they could, but they were also afraid of too much pressure and stress, anxiety. So.
So to summarize your research, from your view, it seems like you said that this kind of event is actually good for Buddhism in this era, right? Because like this gives a chance for people to know more about Buddhism, and when they know more about Buddhism, they kind of want to actually get into the core, right?
Yeah, if it's not my goal to say what should be done, but yes, I try to have a sympathetic view to understand, and from what I could see, yeah, it had a good effect on the people. And so I don't say that everything is perfect in this ritual, and there is of course money issues that I didn't talk about here. That is quite a problem, and so I don't say everything is perfect in it. But from what I could see, yes, it was supportive for the people. And what struck me is sometimes when the Ipshikido are presented, they're a bit despised or a bit simplified. But when I met the mothers and heard the Dharma talks, etc., I felt there was other concerns during the Ipshikidos that were more complex than just getting the exam. And so, yes, I thought it was... it helped people to get closer to more fundamental issues of Buddhism, like I said, incertity and causality, etc.
Also, in your opinions, if actually a temple have more kind of this kind of event.
Sorry.
In your opinions, for example, if you gonna share your opinions about like if the temples organize this kind of event, but not just the event for the exams, but all the event in life, more and more, it's actually gonna be useful for Buddhism.
This I don't know actually. I don't have a prescriptive attitude.
But that is possible, sir.
Yeah, but it depends how it's done, and so it's a bit similar to what I said first. So my position as an anthropologist is not to. I'm not a Buddhist scholar, so I don't do like kind of recommendation of what should be done, or so whatever happens, I just try to understand the logic in it, and my goal was to go beyond the criticism of Ipshikido and see what's going on for the people there and what's their emotion or concern or anxiety, worry in it. So I don't say it's good because first of all, Sunan is not the perfect thing. It creates a lot of problems, etc. So I don't say that it's a good thing. I just try to take this prayer seriously and not to laugh at them and to see what's happening in them. So that's my position. And more.
It focuses on phenomenology.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very phenomenological
Yes,
approach.
so
Yeah.
I think in this classroom we have lots of different methodology to approach the Buddhist tradition. Then, as far as I understand, she just focuses on the phenomenology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in contemporary Buddhism. Question?
Yes, given your research, have you noticed any influence of other religions like Christianity? For instance, I'm from Sri Lanka, so we also have such prayers in our country. So I think that in our country we have that influence of other religions.
Yeah.
So have you noticed anything like that?
Yeah, sure. So this was at the time I started this research. It was very controversial because it was a time when Christian churches were accusing Buddhist temples to imitate them, etc. So the issue was quite controversial. But not all temples, but in several city temples, the temples sometimes organized very explicitly observation visits to churches to pick up good ideas and see what they could integrate in their own organization. So temples were sometimes very explicit about their position to look for good ideas in neighboring churches. But this is one point, but also maybe one of the more fundamental influence I could see, this one was less explicit, was change in membership. Because when we look at, so when I read anthropologists from the 70s or the 80s, and they describe village life, for example, they say that for most villagers, a Buddhist was a monk or a nun, but for general people, they were attending temples, but they were also going to the mudongs, shamans, or doing other rituals. And reorganizing Buddhism as a religion seen in a kind of Western way, and with a kind of strict membership and having membership card and being seeing oneself as a follower of Buddhism, as a layperson, etc., going to the Sunday, teaching, such kind of social organization. I think it's an influence not directly of Christian churches, but of the concept of religion that was brought in East Asia or other parts of Asia in the 20th century. And so it's broader than the Ipshikido issue, but Buddhism reorganized as a religion, also in the relation between the temples and the followers. So this I could notice quite strongly. Yeah. Thank you.
Maybe that's. The 입시기도 is still very popular and very kind of profitable business for temples. But instead, the debate on 기복불교 seems to have lost this kind of academic attention. You think why?
No, this I actually I'm wondering why it's less. No, I should look why it's less strong, this debate. So it's yeah. You told me earlier that it was so. It's an interrogation for me, and I would be curious to see. In Korea, everything is changing quite quickly. So something is controversy, and then it's something else. So I'm wondering why the kibok is no longer a controversy. It's quite a question to me.
Really, just a comment.
Yeah.
Because this year, my second final year in high school. So I put my name on the list with entrance, exam, some kind of prayer and so on. So when I see my experience from the temple, I can see Ichigin or the Buddhist temple organizing a group prayer for the entrance of the university place. Works as a kind of a means through which Buddhist temple can get money from their religion. So economic kind of point of view, together with the 49-day family ceremony, Ipshigido is very, very important part of temple economy. The temple people, so this is the main source of income. And also, as a point of view from the parents, we become very nervous, just like our daughter who is going to take exam and so on. So while we put our name on the list, be the part of that group prayer, we also become very comfortable. And somehow I believe the blessings of Buddha will reach my daughter, can safely enter into the university. That makes me really comfortable and basically with that kind of thinking, I can sleep very well. Every day when I go to sleep. So it has got some kind of a good effect, not only to the temple, but also to the people who donate money. Even though it looks as if a kind of a kickboxing or something like that. But behind that face value, it can actually help us. It can cure our stress at home. So there are some good points about Ipshikido, in terms of temple and me as well. And also, finally, to my daughter. My daughter, she is now applying for the university, and she becomes nervous, and she becomes sometimes not really confident about her entrance into the temple. Whenever she becomes very nervous, I said, with the abbot of the temple, we pray for you every day. So you don't have to worry about that. He will do everything. You just take it as normal as possible. Then she becomes calm down. So that also is another good thing. So from the face value, we look Ipshikido as a kind of devotion, but actually, underneath the system is going on. There are some good things actually happen through that, that sort of Buddhist practice.
Thank you. No, but what you say, it's really close to what, because I talk with a lot of mothers who are praying, and they were saying something very similar to you, the peace of mind they got from that. And I understood it from far, but when I became a mother later, I understood better. I was thinking again, and but I think it brings people to major issue of life about uncertainty and vulnerability, and it's not just light questions.
I just wanted to share something after the point of view of parents, because I'm a person with a Buddhist mother. So in Korea, whatever the names are, we already have that tradition a long time ago. It's a very long time. When we have some important issues, then we purify ourselves, our mind and our body, and we do prayer under the name of Buddhism or whatever. So now Buddhist tradition embraces other traditions also, and also the local tradition. So I think it embraces and it also continues. So for me, it can be Buddhist, so or other tradition also. It can be both of them. So some people can criticize, but it's an eye of beholder. So, as a Buddhist, maybe that's supported by studying this school or my life. So that's the parents in point of that. But also, for me, it's like Professor said that it gives peace for parents and the children, because when we purify our mind and body and focus on something and concentrate, then it helps to have peace. So the purpose is not maybe to get the pass to the university.
Thank you.
Also about the methodologies, which is quite economical and psychological. That's nice. Yeah. Any other question?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, please have a big round of applause, Professor. Yeah.